Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Joe Lowry, and we've got a two-man game, one touring all the way down the field today to look back at the MLS playoff action so far. We have 6 games to discuss, and oh, by the way, a ton of news from teams outside the playoff field as well. To help me break all of this stuff down, I am joined by the one, the only Jeff Reuter. Jeff, how are you, man? Nice to see you.
I'm good. I'm back. It's great. And I'm back to writing. If I can be shameless here off the top for just a second. I have a Substack now, and it's called 5 Asides, and I have absolutely no idea what I can promise you is a cadence or a format, but it's up, and I did my playoff predictions there, and after 43 days without writing, it feels really good to do that again. So in a better way overall, I would say.
Good. I am glad. I've read Jeff's piece. I have also subscribed to the Substack. You all should be doing the exact same thing. I thought, Jeff, that your playoff preview was excellent. And the good news for listeners is because there were no games on Saturday, you can still go read it, and it's still really relevant, this whole playoff thing. Not just because of the series idea, but because there are still 2 games left to be played to open round 1 of the postseason. It's stretched out quite a bit, Jeff, but I mean, for you, now back in your writing boots, that does give your piece the sort of longevity that we crave in modern society. So I imagine you're grateful for that.
I am, yeah. The format actually does me some favors for shelf life. That too seldom do we see in this 24-hour news cycle economy of America. So, yeah, no, I'll take it. It works really well. And if you believe it, I've found new gripes about the format since I wrote that piece. So we'll get into those as the games show you what frustrates me. But, yeah, it's still just such a bizarre idea to do this best of 3 to me, because it's like... It's like when you are watching like a grizzled 33-year-old step up for a penalty and they're doing that like really slow strut up, whatever, and it's taking forever and you're like, you know better than this, just get on with it. That's what it feels like right now. From decision day to the 35 days later when the second round of the playoffs happen, it just feels like one big stutter step penalty.
I maintain that there are real problems with the current playoff format, that those problems will be solved, I think, largely when MLS changes its calendar and they don't have a giant international break right after the best of 3. I'm still enjoying the best of 3. I like it. I think it builds time for our narratives. We've gone through this plenty in the past, so I will at least park it here for now. We're going to get through all of the games so far, and we're going to look around the league for news. So let's get right to it, Jeff. Minnesota United, we're going to go in reverse chronological order because we want to give you the most relevant games first, because that's just who we are here at the Total Soccer Show. Minnesota United 0, Seattle Sounders 0, but Minnesota United winning 3-2 in penalties. Jeff, this game was last night. I watched it this morning because I wanted to have it as fresh in my mind as possible.
When did you wake up?
Too early.
No
Taylor was sending videos of himself in a dinosaur suit in our group chat, and there was just so much going on. It was like Christmas morning, you know? Great. Jeff, you were at this game last night at Allianz.
I was.
I'm curious, what was the environment like? Did this match play out like you expected?
A little bit. It's actually really interesting because I think coming into this series, this much like Charlotte, New York City, which has not yet kicked off, is a series that a lot of people looked at, including ourselves, and said this is going to be one of the more like kind of cagey and defensive and negative. You're going to have to take your chances when you find them because boy, are they going to be scarce, right? Was kind of our idea. And that wasn't the case. There actually was a lot of space that was found by both teams in the first half of the game. And teams that were really putting the opposition under pressure. Seattle obviously trying to kind of go with a field tilt model where they're going to push their high line or their defensive line a little bit higher, and then they're going to be trying to keep the ball and retain Minnesota's half. And then Minnesota doing what Minnesota does when they have their players, which is try to catch you on the break and then lean into the speed that Kelvin Yeboah has. He doesn't start. Bongi Longwane starts again at advance forward. He's just not a striker, and you can kind of see with his movement and his body language. But it was still scoreless because of a failure to capitalize on chances. For Seattle, it was just as simple as, I mean, they get to the final third, and Joe, you can tell that these combinations of players have not gotten to play together very often this season. You can tell that Jordan Morris is still very much integrating, getting used to playing on a club with Jesus Ferreira. And that, Paul Rothrock, I think he knows his role is going to be off ball, but when he needs to see more of the ball, what does that mean for Albert Rusnak, who looked like he completely drifted out of the game for large portions of it? And then for Minnesota, of course, Longwane is not a striker. There is the best chance of the game comes to Minnesota in the first half. They are able to force a turnover and catch a downhill sprint where Bongi Longwane, South Africa International, has Jackson Reagan on skates, and he's backtracking, and he's got probably about a furlong between them. Seems like a golden opportunity, but just can't get his angling right. He's not used to making that central run like this. He doesn't really know how to square up Stephen Fry. Goes right, feels a palm pressed onto his back, starts to kind of fade, gets in his head, tries to draw a penalty, shanks it, sends it wide, ends up going out for a goal kick. It was just one of those games, I think, where it was just so clear that both of these teams have clear strengths that have gotten them this far and that are getting them to this 4-5. But I mean, maybe on the broadcast it looks a little bit different as well. But I'm just kind of really curious what you saw on that side, and then I'll get into the atmosphere after this as well.
Yeah, sure. But I think this had all the makings of a classic game for both teams, and by that I mean Minnesota United were playing their game, which is they grind you to a halt. They were sitting deep back in that back three for this match, which I thought was interesting from Eric Ramsey. Mm-hmm. They were defending in that low 5-4-1 block. They were trying to hit on set pieces. They were doing all their stuff. And they actually had it work out for them in the penalty shootout where Dane St. Clair comes up big both towards the end of regulation and also in the shootout. It was sort of a classic, gutsy, gritty Minnesota United win. That's who they want to be. I've got a piece for Backheel coming out later this week about like sort of Minnesota United's identity and their rebirth and all this kind of stuff. And Khaled El Ahmad, their sporting director, was telling me, we want to lean into how like miserable it is sometimes to be watching soccer games at Allianz in the winter, right? We want to lean into being that kind of team and have our fans sort of know that we're in the same boat with them, right? That we're gutting out wins. Minnesota United did that in this game. This felt like a very loony sort of victory for them. Seattle, I think, were so close to a very Sounders-esque victory, where they control the ball, they control the game, they were good defensively, didn't really allow many chances beyond that Bongi one that you mentioned. And they grind out a victory, except they forgot to do the last part. That was the one part that they forgot to do.
Yeah,
and
that one crucial thing.
The thing is that they had their moments. They were towards the end of regulation. It's Jordan Morris to Danny Musovski multiple times. One is a slip ball where Musovski has the ball on the ground and he can't beat Dane St. Clair at the near post. And the other is a ball in aerially to Danny Musovski from Jordan Morris, and Musovski can't head it on frame. Those were the moments for Seattle. They had another chance in the shootout. They couldn't get it done. It was one of the least skillful shootouts that I've seen in a long time. Seattle not converting 3 of their penalties and 2 of those going off the woodwork, and the other one that was saved was right down the middle. It was tough for Seattle. Like the game was there for them. They didn't take their chances, and that'll come up later in the show as well. But that's sort of my big view is that both teams played sort of the game that they wanted, but Seattle didn't have the finishing touch that they needed.
Yeah, and I think some of that comes down to Seattle just has not had these combinations of attackers together for much of the season at all. And this is the point where it matters. There were also some uncharacteristic slips, I would say, from the Roldan and Vargas partnership that has been so fantastic throughout the season for them. And so therefore the midfield got gummed up a little bit. It actually gave Minnesota a bit more of a foothold in just kind of like resting states of possession. The fact that those two weren't quite, and there's a lot of slipping as well. I don't know if the cameras cut all this, but it seemed like they were really eager to water the pitch at halftime, especially. Even the refs slipped off the ball, which that's usually a sign that maybe
it's a good sign.
Watch it for the next game, right? Luckily, Alexis De Silva did not tear an ACL off the ball. That would be crazy. But I will say the other thing, and I agree with you that Brian Schmetzer was surprised that players, his quote was, that are usually lights out in penalties that they've been practicing for 2 weeks now, really struggled and flubbed their lines. The atmosphere was this weird sort of case study of what happens when MLS schedules home playoff games. Well, one team's at home inevitably, right? On Mondays. And you look, and on the one hand, the fans were incredibly into it. The Wonderwall was packed. There's supporter section. There's standing room. It's all standing room. But at the top of it, it was 2-3 rows back of people standing to look over the top of it like a rock show. So that's a good sign. But there were so many empty seats on the broadcast, and it was really clear to see just on that side of the second deck. Your diehards are going to show up to these playoff games, MLS. They will always show up if you schedule these. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you could put it at 3 in the afternoon on a Wednesday and they'll cancel their meetings. They won't go to the DMV, whatever. The thing is, a lot of people have kids. A lot of people have routines. For a lot of people, this is their weekend entertainment, and you put it on a weekday, they're going to have to make sacrifices. School's still going on October 28th on a Tuesday morning, so they can't really pull the kids necessarily if you're going to have a kickoff at 8 p.m. local. So the crowd was exactly what MLS deserved. Your diehard showed up. You got good audio for the broadcast. It looks empty. It looks like you struggled to fill that game, much like it did for the play-in games, much like it will look probably on Tuesday in Charlotte based on what the club is saying about it. And I would guess Wednesday as well with LAFC. We'll see what they go. At least Wednesday is more in the cadence of MLS. But it's really frustrating to see some of these games that are promised to season ticket holders as the marquee part of you investing in this as priority to our playoff games. And then, oh, by the way, it's a scheduling conflict for your kids playing any activities, or for you having rest and time on your couch. So it's frustrating, right? It's just one of those things where I was trying to talk about it with, in the press box and all these things, trying to figure out was there something I was missing? Is there a reason that this game at a team-owned facility was being played on a Monday? And I just got a lot of those kind of side eyes, which is Minnesotan for none of us asked for this.
Right, and then here's some hot dish for you. Just put it in your mouth.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
Think that's how that
As
goes.
a treat.
Right.
Right.
I think that's all. I think that's all very fair, Jeff. I am less passionate, and also probably because I wasn't there, a little bit less passionate about that topic, and I can see some validity to MLS wanting to have more broadcast windows, right, and wanting to make the playoffs feel like more of an event, which I think helps when you stagger the kickoff slightly, but points still taken. I think let me quickly empty the chamber on this, and we got to move on. I think Dane St. Clair was excellent in this game for Minnesota, so apologies to the folks who have kids that couldn't come to this game because you missed a good performance from your shot stopper. I thought he was excellent coming up big late in the match as well. And then Nectarios Triantis, I thought looked like the absolute business in this game in the double pivot next to Will Trapp. I've been really impressed with him. He scored he's had some delightful moments since he arrived in the summer transfer window. He is this box-to-box midfield presence who can also play as a center back, so he brings positional versatility. His engine to cover ground is impressive, and his quality on the ball, this game in tight spots, I thought was something that Minnesota United didn't really have enough of, frankly, in their 3-4-3. And I am glad that Eric Ramsey went back to that back three, because I think even though you're still struggling up top with the 9, Tani's gone, Calvin Yeboah is not fully fit, so you have Bongi playing up top, you don't trust Mamadou Dieng just yet. So it was Bongi, and that role doesn't fit him, as you've already mentioned. But I think it fits, that setup fits a number of the other players, where you get Lod and Pereira in the half spaces instead of them playing as those dual false nines that we've seen in each of the last 2 games. And you get Marcanic back on that left side playing as an out-and-out wing-back, which I think he really thrives in. So I like that shape. I do think we'll see Minnesota continue to stick with it, even as they're not at full strength. And I want to leave it here, Jeff. I'm curious if there's anything else beyond what I'm about to say that you would change if you're Brian Schmetzer coming into game 2. I think they need one more dribbly boy on the field because they had 0. And they lost Pedro de la Vega on decision day. That really hurts. He would have started on the left side in this game. I don't doubt that. I would start Georgia Manungu over Paul Rothrock or like Ferreira or Rus. I mean,
I'm
not
fine with that.
Probably. I would move Rusnak into the half. Excuse me. I'd move Rothrock into the half spaces, or I would just take him off the field because Minnesota are going to do the exact same thing but harder on the road. And I think they need Manungu's 1v1 ability because they tried to pass their way through that block for 90 minutes. They didn't have success for the first 80 or so of them. I think Schmetzer's going to try to change something, and I think that's what he's going to do.
I know that Rusnak has his doubters amongst the Seattle Sounders fan base, and I've always kind of questioned that. But I will say this was a game where I was left wanting a lot more from Albert Rusnak. And so a part of me kind of wonders, is having him drift off to the right in this shape? He was kind of doing some back and forth with Jesus Ferreira with who was on the right and who was playing central. I think that needs more clarity. I don't think those two have kind of choreographed those exchanges well, and I think that right now Ferreira is just going to kind of force his way. Rusnak took 4 shots. Like, he still showed up in the game, but he just... When I was watching the game up in the box, I wasn't seeing this is the focal point of the attack. This is the main designated player. This is who this should be going through. And you saw some of these same issues in the Club World Cup against Botafogo as well, where you have too many facilitators and they're too cerebral. They're too in their head with these things, and they just need to let the ball roll. And I think Manungu is really good for that. Rothrock can be good for that too. But yeah, I think at this point, you've just got to kind of poke the coals and see where there's fire, and then just really trust that that's the avenue you should go down.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's move on to the other game from yesterday, working our way backwards. FC Cincinnati 1, Columbus Crew 0, a hell is real matchup in Cincinnati. Jeff, I read this game as a tight, cagey affair that was at least in part decided by the best player on the field, and that was Evander playing that through ball in behind on the goal sequence to Echenike. Echenike plays it across, Denke eventually finishes. It is a delightful through ball from Evander in a game that, despite the amount of talent on the field for these teams, didn't feel like it had a whole lot of quality throughout it. Is that the right read on this game? Is that the wrong read on this game? Where do you fall?
Yeah, I think that's about right. There's quality there, but when you have a genuine rivalry, not just like I guess we don't like each other historically, but like no, we really, really don't like each other, it's going to get ugly, right? And that's where those moments of quality are going to be greatly appreciated. These are things that Cincinnati couldn't do last season against New York City in the first round when they got bounced, right? They did not have the players who can wrestle an ugly game into moments that are pretty, that are also effective. And that's what Evander can do. That's what Denke can do by being in the right spot in the box. That's why you spend a record fee. These are the sorts of things Atlanta was probably expecting from Lade Loth. These are the things that LAFC are enjoying with Son Heung-min, right? And Cincinnati obviously has that with Kevin Denke. I think has been a really good validation of their trust and investment in him in his first season. And I think that he'll be a Golden Boot contender next year as well. For Columbus, though, it's the exact inverse of that, where it's just you look and you say, this is where the inability to replace Cucho Hernandez for as long as they have has really caught up with them, because they were generating possession. I mean, like, they were able to keep it pretty much 50-50 on the nose with Cincinnati in Cincinnati. They were pushing the offside trap a little bit. I think they were blown 6 times called off for offside. So, like they were trying to push the initiative there, and that would be really good to stretch the field. That would be really good to get behind the defensive line that Cincinnati has, because There isn't a ton of mobility once you get past Miles Robinson. But the issue is they didn't have the end product. And I don't think Diego Rossi is a focal point for an attack.
Agreed.
I think that he has always thrived as that second guy playing off of Carlos Vela or Cucho Hernandez. Like, he is just a really good auxiliary second guy. But it just isn't flowing right now with Picard and Lapalainen playing off of him.
Yeah.
It just, like, it is so clear that this is where they need to do. And I will say they made attempts this year. Daniel Gazdag, of course, comes off the bench. Just a really tough sort of, this is the turnover. I'm not sure the turnover looks as good as the predecessor. That's concerning.
It's a lot of money sitting on your bench, man. Like, and not to say that it's unwarranted of a decision from Wilfred Nancy. Daniel Gazdag's not been very good for this team. But between no Gazdag and no Abu Ali, and all of a sudden Rossi's now not in his best position because he has to be more of a focal point. Lapalainen and Picard, you mentioned it. Like, they did not make it so in this game. It was like it wasn't pretty from Columbus in a game, and from a team that you sort of expect. Even if Wilfred Nancy doesn't have any pieces, he's still going to make this beautiful attacking puzzle. I don't think we saw that in this game. I have real, genuine concerns, Jeff, and it sounds like you do too, that the attack is not going to be enough for them to get back into this series or for them to make a real run, right? And I thought it was going to be the defense, right? I thought coming into the playoffs, you have not been good defensively, Columbus, this year. It's been their worst defensive performance based off of non-penalty XG allowed per game under this year under Nancy than it's been in either of the last two seasons. Like, this is the worst that it's been for them. But I thought their defensive work was fine in this game. I thought they were fine enough. Cincinnati's front three didn't look like it was firing on all cylinders here. But Columbus, I don't think they showed enough in the attack for me to feel good about them getting back into this series. Anything's possible. Like, the margins between these teams are still fine. Part of that is because Cincinnati continued to just like walk that margin perfectly somehow. Yeah. Jeff, 21 wins for Cincinnati in MLS play this year. 17 of those wins have been by a single goal. Should we just like stop doubting?
Wow.
Like, all I can do is poke holes in this Cincinnati team because I'm just still not convinced. But it just doesn't seem to matter. They've won a stupid number of games. They win them all close. Should I just stop caring? Like, tell me what to do.
Yeah, it's tough because I also thought Cincinnati would be, primed for a slip because of some of those issues to actually have that sort of decisiveness. And it looked like they fell off of the Shield race in a way that wasn't befitting a team that is a contender on all fronts. But there is a point where you get enough of a sample size and it becomes a skill again, right? Like, think about us talking in our playoff preview episode about Charlotte, where it's like, okay, how many of those 9 wins in a row were 1-goal wins? How much do we even trust that? Okay, well, if you can do it 17 times and you constantly have these players missing within those 17 and you still are finding a way, yeah, that's a skill. If you're able to pull this off and you're still trying to work Oben and Bodo back into fitness to maybe shore up the midfield with more pieces, only plays like, just a very late cameo in this game after going 45 on decision day. So, hopefully that's not a sign that he's, had a setback and it's more just Pat Noonan wanting to ride the horses who are keeping them in the game and all these sorts of things. Totally fair. But yeah, I think that overall, when you look at Cincinnati, maybe this is their identity. Maybe that's okay. Maybe, we've been spoiled over the last couple of years by having the LA Galaxy with Ricky Puig and Wilfred Nancy's Columbus Crew, and we're thinking these champions need to be dominating in these games, and we need to have these 2, 3, 4 goal wins to illustrate this is why you're the best team of the year. Maybe the best team of the year is just the team that wins the most games, and that's okay. And this is a credible threat. This is why I don't think you and I have ever discounted this FC Cincinnati as like a viable threat for MLS Cup, and I think now they're just maybe adding Brenner was enough to be able to get the attack to, there is someone else that defenses are going to have to think about, which means that Denke is finding a little bit more room around the box. Evander's finding a little bit room outside of it, and it's making everyone happy. So in that sense, good work by Chris Albright and the recruitment team to identify and bring him back. It's looking... There still are other teams I maybe have more confidence in, but it's not because I'm not confident in Cincinnati. I'll put it that way.
These newfangled ideas about the teams that win games being the best, Jeff, I don't know where you're getting these things. I need to throw us a break. I want to shout out Samuel Getty. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that last name. That's my fault. 21-year-old who signed recently for Cincinnati. He was partnering Pavel Buka in this game. I thought he was really good. And without Nwobodo, as you mentioned, I don't think Cincinnati missed him as much as I thought they would. Impressive recruitment yet again by the front office, because that's pretty much all Cincinnati do. Jeff, let's go to break. We got so many more games to talk about. We will do that and talk about some drama on the other side. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us. Jeff, let's head to San Diego 2. The Portland Timbers won. This game was on Sunday evening. It was the last game on Sunday. Jeff, there's some drama surrounding this whole San Diego squad right now. Chucky Lozano missed this game, suspended by his own team for disciplinary reasons following an outburst at halftime earlier on this month. He wasn't in the matchday squad now for the second game in a row. I don't think they missed him hardly at all in this game. What did you make of Lozano's absence and San Diego's play without him?
It's one of those where I think that sometimes you give players the opportunity to start in a game that they know that if everyone was on their best behavior, they wouldn't. And you just see something kind of electric. Like, I really liked watching Pellegrino's performance in the playoffs. I thought that he did some really good stuff with, like, spacing the game, trying to give that sort of a run that's going to help the possession model work even better, because the defense can't just converge and try to meet you wherever the center of possession is. They actually have to think about those runners, and I don't know if Lozano's always making that same sort of selfless, like kind of self-sacrificial run just to keep them honest. And so I thought that there was some really good stuff that was going on there. My other thought, unfortunately, is just while the Portland Timbers look incredibly overmatched from a talent perspective. Yep. And that's an indictment of the recruitment as much as the coaching. But I think that you look and it was difficult to see how they were going to get their way back. And then they kind of find that sort of element of surprise in the 36th minute, and they're able to work a good passing sequence. Christian Felder remembers that you can shoot from inside the box. That's tongue-in-cheek, nothing but love, Portland fans. Shoots it, scores it. Everyone thinks, okay, it's 2-1. The expansion team just gave up a goal. We haven't been confident in the goalkeeper on this team all year, so like maybe things are going to get wonky. And then it just kind of doesn't. And there's no second gambit for Portland to pull off, and there's no sort of second mistake for San Diego to have exploited on their right. So like it ended up being a very straightforward 1 seed versus 8 seed. We aren't used to seeing this in this new format yet, and San Diego will face sterner tests in the bracket, I think, Joe. But I don't know. It just seemed like once they got that second goal, and once Dreyer got his goal as well, his moment in the playoffs, so that he could be like, yes, I'm good for this bracket as well. That's kind of all they needed from this game, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think San Diego did more than enough to get the result that I expected. I called this series as being the most lopsided before the playoffs started. I was wrong. That will be Vancouver-Dallas that we'll get to in a second. I was almost right, because San Diego were so good in the first half of this game. And credit to Portland in a small way, in that Velda does make them pay off of that mistake in the turnover in midfield. It's a good goal from Velda. Portland do enough to get themselves back in the game a little bit. I know they had some looks in the second half. I still just didn't. It never seemed to me like Portland were a huge threat in this game. And you talked about the lack of talent, Jeff, straight up, that this team has. I've been thinking about it as like real, genuine talent bleed for Portland. And we've talked about this some all year long, but it's a downgrade from Evander to David Acosta. It's a downgrade from J-Rod, Jonathan Rodriguez on the left to Velda. Although Velda, I do think, looks legit useful. Like, he looks like a good player. It's a downgrade from Santi Moreno, who they lost midseason. That kind of got buried under the Lucho Acosta going to Brazil thing, because it happened at like sort of a similar time. But Moreno basically just pouted his way out of Portland. And it's a downgrade from him to Matias Rojas, who's injured for this series, by the way. Rojas and Felipe Carballo, who are both signed in the summer, both injured. That's tough luck for the Timbers. But they're not the only team dealing with injuries and absences, right? They just didn't have enough in this game, straight up. And they were really never going to, in my mind. I'm worried about Portland in this series. I don't think that they're going to have a whole lot. For San Diego, man, everything's going right for them right now. They on the field, off the field, except for the Lozano thing, I suppose. But he's supposed to be back for game 2, according to Mikey Varas. Varas told Weeby that after this game, it sounds like he's on track to come back. A little bit of weird phrasing there, but it is what it is. Jeppe Tverskov signs a contract extension. He's been immense for them. Like, he was in my best 11, Jeff. I think he was in yours as well. He's been so good this year and was so good in this game. There's a moment, and I should clip it and put it on social media. There's a moment in this game in the first half where San Diego are like just playing with their food, right? They have so many looks before they actually put the ball in the back of the net, where Tverskov's on the ball. Corey Baird was starting up top as the 9 in this game. Corey Baird and Pellegrino both in the 11. San Diego still looking dominant. It just doesn't matter. Baird had pulled all the way right. So he's like, I think he's the widest player on the right side for San Diego in this moment. Tverskov's on the ball, sort of advanced in the right half space, because of course, where else would you put your number 6? And Tverskov's on the ball and just kind of like waiting for something to happen around him. He sees the run that Corey Baird's about to make in behind Portland's backline before Baird sees it. And Baird eventually realizes, oh, that's where the space is. I have to go and move into it because that's my job now that I'm on the right. And he makes that run, and Tverskov plays the easiest through ball ever, because San Diego, even though Tverskov saw it first, Baird saw it second, both of those guys, and almost every San Diego player, saw that run in that space before Portland saw it. And that has been the San Diego thing all year long, is what makes them so special, is that they carve you open with their off-ball movement. Like, no team in MLS, in my mind, is better at seeing that space and moving into it off the ball to then receive the ball. Nobody's better at it than San Diego. And we saw that in this game, even if they made it a little bit tight, a little nervy towards the end, even with Portland down to 10 men. I thought San Diego were more than good enough. Jeff, anything else on this game before we move on to the next?
No, I think that we're good to move on.
Okay,
I think
let's
that
do
you've nailed it. There's just the talent. I thought Luca Bambino, I just want to shout out as well. We talked about him more early in the season. We kind of didn't sing his praises as much, even though he was as good. Just another one, a really good assist for him. And I don't know. I just think that that's a left back to monitor in the future, not just for MLS purposes, but for men's national team purposes as well. 19
Totally
years
agree.
old.
100%. All right, Vancouver 3, FC Dallas 0. This game was also on Sunday. Jeff, did you vote Jesper Sorensen Coach of the Year? I'm building to something. Okay.
Yes,
as did
I did. Yeah.
Oh, well played, sir. That's good.
For once.
This game made me feel even better about voting for Sorensen because Vancouver just keep doing it. None of their first 4 center back choices could start in this game. Ralph Priso, not a tall man, is a squat sort of man. He starts at center back up against Petar Musa, who might be like the most talented pure 9 in MLS. I think there's a very real case to that. No Brian White, no Gald in the 11. No problem. Vancouver were utterly dominant. This was the most one-sided game of the entire first round so far. I would be shocked if Charlotte NYCFC later today or Austin LAFC tomorrow, if they equal that. They were so good, Vancouver, in this game, creating chance after chance after chance. Jeff, how do they keep doing this without a squad that is even remotely close to full strength? How does this happen?
I think that a lot of these players, like let's say 10 of the 11 players, have gone through a lot together this season, and so they've had to deal with the CCC defeat and the humiliation that came with it, and the rebuilding thereafter, and Pedro Vite leaving, and how are we going to kind of cobble this thing together? And I think that they still have the testing. I think that like you didn't have to see it from Takaoka because Dallas gave him like actually nothing to do for the most part. But you look at the field players and your Berhalters, your Kubases, like whatever, their Tate Johnsons even. They've seen the big games at least. They've done this against Liga MX's opposition. But this is where when you bring in Thomas Muller, this is where you actually have done a lot of knock-on favors because he's going to be your most important guy. He's not going to be fazed by the opener of the first round best of 3 series against FC Dallas at a 32,000, like a record crowd for Vancouver in the playoffs, which was awesome too. They've got the town behind them, but he's not going to see that as like, oh, I better not flub my lines, right? He's done the Royal Shakespeare Company for decades. And you bring him in, and he's able to come in, and he looks calm, cool, collected, buries a penalty, obviously, but does just a lot of really good things where you'll look and you'll see. Usually, like, let's say a player wants a diagonal and they're starting to make that run and it's like 2 strides past them, Joe. How often do you see them turn and they're going to clap and they're going to say, I like that. Thanks for at least giving me that opportunity. Let's do more of that, whatever. Muller is doing that when someone passes it to someone else. And he's going around trying to like validate, gas up his teammates and just be like, yes, more of that. Yes, good. Like he really is leaning into this in a way that is just like the opposite of what we usually see from like a 35 plus who's coming to MLS after like a distinguished career in Europe. It's just amazing to watch. And it's something that like if I'm Dallas, I'm just humiliated because I'm just like, well, we can't. No one on our team is doing that sort of thing. And we don't even have the good vibes to pull it together. Like I said last week, I think there are going to be better days ahead for Dallas. This ain't going to be it. And, I think I'm with you. This is the most lopsided matchup, it turns out. And it makes total sense why.
I want to come back to that better days ahead for Dallas idea. First on Vancouver, Muller scores a penalty in this game. It was like it was the Thomas Muller show for large chunks of this match, and it was the Vancouver show. Like they were so incredibly dominant when they possessed the ball, and they possessed the ball a lot in this game in their regular 3-2-5 attacking setup with Muller in the half spaces. I've been really impressed. To look at the other side briefly, I've been really impressed with Eric Quill, manager of FC Dallas, and his willingness to change his team's identity when needed, where it's a big personnel and tactical shift when Lucho Acosta leaves. They go to play against the ball instead of trying to be this sort of pseudo-possession team. They sit deep, like deeper than anybody else in MLS, deeper to the point where they kind of make the next team's defensive line look like they're playing like Barcelona. When you go and look at the average line of confrontation metric in MLS right now, it's a Dallas team that has a very clear identity. All that said, I do not think Dallas looked prepared for this game whatsoever. I don't think Eric Quill's team looked ready for what they were dealing with, which was shocking to me, given that these two teams had just played on decision day. Like this was a familiar matchup for Dallas, and they looked like they had just rolled out of bed for this game. And I don't know exactly where the blame lies, but man, whether it was in the low block where you think about they were defending back in this really deep back 3, back 5, they give up 6 shots inside the width of the 6-yard box and inside 12 yards in the first half. Just think about that. Like, those are high-quality looks. They gave up so many of those moments. Urquide, I don't think had his best game. He was clearly the most competent defender in this Dallas backline. And like, he needed more adults around him. Like, he needed more people that could like go and like rally the children to organize them and get them set up. It was brutal. And it wasn't just a low block, right? Where maybe at that point I would think, okay, this is just like Dallas don't have the personnel. This is where I'm like going to criticize Quill a little bit. The press for Dallas was woeful in this game. Like, absolutely woeful. I clocked one in the 30th minute between Sam Sarver, who started on the right side, and Ramirez, who Quill's been using as a right wing back at times, even though he's more of a center mid. Like, Sarver is literally like throws his hands up in the air, and those two guys don't know how to go and press Vancouver in their build out. It's really bad again in the 41st minute. On the other side, it wasn't just like two guys, winger and wing back, not figuring out their responsibilities. It was both sides.
Right.
Again, I've been really impressed with Quill and like his flexibility and seeing, okay, I'm not going to be so dogmatic because it's just not going to work anymore. We have to change something if we want to win this year. I respect that a lot. I really do. This team looked like a shell, and they didn't look prepared in almost any phase of the game. I'm a little bit worried, not just about Dallas like in the short term, but Jeff, this is where I wanted to get back to what you said before about better days being ahead. Here's my concern for Dallas, and I don't know if this is founded or not, so I want you to tell me. The question I want to ask is there a risk that once Dallas are eliminated, the front office over-indexes on the fact that they made the playoffs and doesn't give this squad the help that it clearly needs, right? Where Lalas Abubakar is your halftime solution defensively, and he's just not good enough to play center back in big games in MLS. Like, straight up. It's just not possible.
No,
is that a concern? Like, should Dallas fans be concerned that they make an automatic playoff spot? Okay, not terrible, all things considered. Like, that's a decent season. And now their front office is going to be like, oh, we don't need to give Eric Quill anymore. Like, he got it. Think of what he could do in a full season. Think of how good they were in the last third of the year. They don't need more. Quill doesn't need more. Is that a concern, or am I just like kind of picking holes in this team?
No, I think that's entirely fair, because we saw the exact same thing happen 2 years ago with Sporting Kansas City and last year with Atlanta United, right? These teams that are, and those are both teams that won their first round series, right? So there's that true like kind of perverse sort of, we had success, which means that you don't need to be smart as we go into this next phase. If you're Kansas City, you can do nothing, and if you're Atlanta, you can do way too much, and none of it can be coherent, and it'll work out the way it deserves to work out. With Dallas, I think that you have this like 10-game stretch, especially after Lucho Acosta leaves, where you have tape to say parts of this are working. And parts of this are working against the teams that, like, when you look at the teams that they beat after, like, the start of August, let's say, so once play kind of resumed in that window, they beat Portland, they beat Austin, they beat Colorado, they beat the Galaxy, and then they beat Vancouver on decision day, which was just kind of like a tune-up, like both teams just kind of rotating a little bit. Petar Musa was suspended for that game anyway. Those aren't really like statement wins. These are the wins you need to go from being the 11th team in the Western Conference to the 7th and missing the play-in game entirely, which they did, right? So they had that success there. But I think this is the tape where you actually, if you're a Quill, you look and you say, no, this is how much more work we have to do. Like, this is where Vancouver is a team that, I mean, like, the Hunt family probably sits at the Board of Governors meetings right next to the Kerfoots, right? Because they so often are ideologically aligned in terms of the direction of Major League Soccer when you look at the product strategy committee in years of old that they used to co-helm, right? And the direction of spending and roster construction in this league, whatever. Well, now Vancouver is doing that. Now Vancouver is one of the 2 or 3 most like eye-catching and also magnetic sort of teams in the league right now. Dallas could do that if they make the right moves. And I think that that's where you look and you say, we have the striker. We need to maximize this opportunity. Either we're going to have a better chance of winning trophies, or we're going to inflate Musa's goal totals because he has better service, and that's going to make him worth even more money for your investment, and the cycle continues. But I think at this point you look and you say, we pretty much need to do a lot of work in these 2 banks, but the ones that's kind of the hardest to do, the attack, we actually have the best piece possible. Right. Yeah. It's sort of like I had no faith that DC United would be able to do that for Kitchen Benteke. But I think that there's such an opportunity that Dallas has here for Petar Musa that, you know, there could be a very fun offseason ahead for them. I just hope that they see the opportunity and take it.
Yeah, well said, Jeff. Let's move ourselves. Congratulations to Vancouver. Let's head to Philadelphia Union 2, Chicago Fire 2, the Union winning this game in penalties. It was the other shootout we've had so far. This game was a delight, I think, Jeff. I have this down as the best game of the playoffs so far. The only game with goals that actually went to that shootout. I think credit has to go to Philly, first and foremost. I think they were the better team in this game, and they would have won it in regulation if not for the ghost of Jack Elliott coming back to haunt them at Subaru with that absolute banger where Jack Elliott just shows up in the playoffs, at least in regulation. I was impressed by the Union, even though this game ended up being very, very nervy for them, and they are a kick or 2 in that shootout away from probably this opening looking slightly different. Am I alone in thinking that the Union were actually pretty good despite how close this game was?
They were, but I saw the reasons that I was concerned and like not including them necessarily. I wasn't giving them a direct path to MLS Cup, right?
Sure.
I think I saw some of those concerns play out a little bit, right? And for 70 minutes, it was the Union's game. For 75 minutes, it was so clear that this was a home game, that they were going to control the tempo, and that the opponent was playing scared. Chicago went into a bunker in a way that we just haven't seen much this season for the first 75 minutes, and we're playing very conservatively, and they just don't have the players to do that well, right? Like they don't have the defenders who are calm on the ball. They don't have the midfielders who are nimble to get around players and to keep the, retain possession like a Hector Herrera type or whatever, right? They don't really have those guys. And Philadelphia also recognized a defensive issue with Chicago, which is that Andrew Gutman almost always overcommits down the left bank, which then leaves the right side open. And both of Philadelphia's goals in the second half come from breaks down their right wing. And there's a part of me that then is just kind of like, oh, I wish Quinn Sullivan had been available and hadn't torn his ACL for this, because I think that he could have had like an incredible shift down that right flank, doing his usual sort of like quick twitch chance creation that he does so well. And I think that this game could have been over by halftime if Quinn Sullivan had been there. But instead, Milan Olowski comes in and he scores a goal as well. Indiana Veselev also has a really nice. So you're also seeing some more of this, like the unsung heroes of this league can still be the ones who lead us to trophies. And so that's good. That's like an ethos that's really critical to Major League Soccer. They also made some really obvious mistakes. Pop quiz. There was one team in MLS that actually scored more goals from set pieces per 100 attempts than Minnesota United. And everyone talks about Minnesota being the best set piece team. You can probably guess because of when I'm bringing this up.
Is it Philadelphia?
It's Chicago.
It's Chicago. I had a 50-50.
No, it's all good. But like Chicago was far and away the best set piece team in Major League Soccer. Like Minnesota, for every 100 that they take, they'd score 6.7. And Chicago just like, they were able to do it again. They were able to do it in both of these. It was corner kicks that they were cleared well, that Philadelphia kind of flubbed their lines on a bit. And this is, I guess, where I get to my second gripe about the playoffs, actually, Joe. and actually, please, maybe you should just go ahead and say, like, is there anything about Philadelphia that you especially really like that they were doing in this game before I go into that?
Sure. I think Philadelphia, they are so good at what they do well. And Chicago, what impressed me about this game is not that Philly were perfect. And I actually think if we do look forward a little bit, they've got another game coming up against Chicago where if we see a similar game plan from the Fire, it could be difficult for the Union, because it was difficult for them for most of this game. I want to be clear. And then if they're able to get out of this first round, which I expect they will at this stage, then they've got either NYCFC or Charlotte, who are going to probably make the game difficult and play against the ball at stretches. It's a tough road for Philly. But even in this game, with Chicago taking away what the Union do best, which is to actually go and play in transition, Philly still found ways to go and play in transition. Like that is what impressed me so much is the game didn't need to stretch much in the second half, but it stretched a little bit, and boom, Philadelphia are in behind you. And then it happens again after Chicago overextend because now they're desperate and there's no reason for them not to push forward. And then boom, it's 2-0. Like Philly are so effective on the break. They're so effective at turning a sliver into like an entire wide ray of sunshine. Like it is so impressive to me what they do. And it's even more impressive given the backdrop of how Berhalter approached this game, where he had been a 3-4-3. He'd been setting up this team in a 3-4-3 heading into the wildcard game. It was then a 4-3-3 against Orlando. They looked really good in that game. Chicago was their best game of the year. Orlando completely wet the bed in that match. And then Chicago shift back to the 3-4-3. And not just that, they sat deep. 43% of the ball in this game. It was one of their 5 or 8 least possession-y sort of games of the season. The game plan was obvious. It was take away what the Union do best. Like, we will bend for you because we are so scared of what you do that we're going to try to take that away. And they still couldn't do it, Chicago. I think the Elliott goal is a little bit of a fluke. Like, it's a great moment.
Yeah, it is.
I don't really knock the Union for that. No Zinkernagle, of course, for Chicago with that injury. That does make Philadelphia's life a little bit easier. But I thought that the Union overcame a game plan that was clearly designed to get at their biggest weakness, and we're still the better team. I was impressed by that. So that's where I come down on Philadelphia. That was also my bet on Chicago as well. I liked the game plan from Berhalter. It almost worked. It was really close. I think it was warranted. I liked the decision. It just didn't. And that's kind of how it goes in these sorts of games. Jeff, now please complain. I will pull up a chair. I will sit and listen. I'll grab my bag of chips and just listen for a bit.
Great. The issue here is that Philadelphia did, I think, have a credible win here. And Chicago was able to play spoiler in a nice way. This is where I'm like, why are we going right to penalties after 90 minutes in these games?
Oh, and I'm not on board with this. Continue, though.
That's good because, I think For me, I understand with the Leagues Cup. It's a gimmick tournament. It's midseason. We need these games to be done efficiently. This isn't something where, like, if we're saying that we're having this tournament as MLS and Liga MX while also being considerate of players' bodies, you take 30 minutes off of this. I think you need 30 more minutes when it's a playoff game. And so this is where I also get in my head, because it's like, okay, but it's a best of 3. You don't want to have these, like, I don't know, these old, like, 1950s, like, roadshow style epic films basically being presented, where every single series is going to go 150 minutes times 3 or whatever, right? Or like 120 times 3. You can't afford to have that. But if it's a playoff game, and if the results are going to dictate whether or not a season is a success or a failure in these teams' eyes, or coaches and players have their jobs in the future, whatever, I think that in the playoffs, you need to let them play 30 more minutes. I think that these are the sorts of games where season's on the line, and you need soccer to decide the results more than you need penalty shootouts. When it's scoreless and whatever, like, I kind of understand. Like the Minnesota-Seattle one, I wasn't having this thought as much as I was with Philadelphia-Chicago, where there was such a pendulum swing as well, where you kind of want to see, does Philadelphia work their way out from under it? Does Chicago continue to kind of just ride the high of Elliott's late equalizer in stoppage time, and then say, like, okay, now we're going to go into extra time and we're going to seal this sucker, right? Like, I just think that from an entertainment standpoint, like, I understand the spectacle of penalties, but in terms of, again, the fairness of competition, I just think that in the playoffs, the extra 30 makes sense. Joe, counterpoint.
Yeah, I just think extra time soccer is trash 9 times out of 10. That's my big takeaway. Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned it in your argument for. I'll just pinpoint it as the argument against. I didn't need to see 30 more minutes of Minnesota-Seattle. I just really didn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We can split these two games down the middle and call it a draw, and we can all get on with our lives.
Fair.
I hear what you're saying. In playoff soccer, in this format of round 1 does kind of open the door for games to be more interesting and for teams to take some risks because the aggregate scores don't matter. I just don't need to see extra time soccer like that. Every once in a while, you get an absolute banger of a 30-minute extra time period, and it's amazing. The other times you don't. So I will. That's my counterpoint. I hear what you're saying though, Jeff. I don't mind the theory behind it, even if I'm not hopping in the boat and rowing with you. We need to take another break. Let's do that. Congratulations to Philly on that tight win. We'll come back, talk about Miami, and look around the league for teams not in the postseason. Stay with us. Hey, welcome back. We're back. Jeff, you and me, we're still here. We're back. We're going to talk about Inter Miami's 3-1 win over Nashville SC. Jeff, a lot of talk coming out of this game about BJ Callahan's shift for Nashville, Patrick O'Houlihan, and their shift to more of a 4-3-3, certainly in defense. I think that was notable. My take, I'm just going to give you my take. I'm not even going to ask you a question. Maybe I'll ask you a question. We'll see. Stay on your toes. My take on this game is that Nashville just didn't take their chances. Jacob Schaffelberg has a moment in the first 15 minutes of this game, a great opportunity in behind, just absolutely schlubs it against Rocco Rios Novo. Against Miami, you will always get your moments. And Miami were incredibly sloppy in the first 25 minutes of this game. Nashville had their moments. They did not take them. Their only goal comes deep in stoppage time. It's like a consolation goal after they're already down 3-0. That, to me, more than BJ Callahan's tactical shift, that is the thing that sinks Nashville in this game. Is that the right read? I guess here's a question. Is that the right read? Or do you think something else decided this game?
No, I think that's spot on. I think you need to be opportunistic, because I think the second half of that point is always because Miami is bad at reacting when something goes wrong. Right? Like, and so, like, it isn't just like, oh, because you will succeed. It's no, because it'll compound, and then these things will continue to manifest in their brains, and they'll be like, I haven't heard of these guys. For half of their lineup, they haven't heard of, they don't know who Daniel Lovitz is the way that we do as MLS like junkies, right? Like, so they're going to look and say, like, why are we not scoring against this defense? Who is this guy, right? And that's been the story of Miami ever since July of 2023. And Nashville just didn't give them that fight. Again, we talked about it. They have really, really struggled in this sort of like fake rivalry of we joined MLS at the same time, so our histories are going to kind of dovetail nicely and be compared to each other in the way that like Portland and Vancouver and New York City and Orlando, Minnesota, Atlanta, whatever. I don't know. It was one of those games where it became a little easy to look away from it, which was weird, because it was less to do with the like Friday night of it all, and it was more to do with just its full confidence that once Miami got that first breakthrough, and once it was clear that Nashville was built way more conservatively than usual with the personnel choices. And this is where you also get into some of the issues of, do you need to put your best players on the field if they haven't played together during the season, that we talked a little bit about with Seattle. This was, I think, the 5th time that Walker Zimmerman had partnered at center back with Jason Palacios, and the entire season, and they were 2-2 and very sparse as well. So it's just like, if you have a center back partnership that still hasn't really played alongside each other, and you're going up against Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez, That's a bold idea. I understand that you need to, like, those might be your two best center backs, but you had partnerships that were much better worked over the course of availability throughout the 25 season. So I don't know. With Nashville, it's just it's frustrating to see. It's a missed opportunity. Yes, there's a chance to right some wrongs at Giotis and maybe at least force a third game there. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. But yeah, the calibration right now, it looked very off, and it was so clear that Nashville wasn't equipped to do what they would want to do ideally. This was not the version of themselves they're proudest of, I don't think.
No, I completely agree. And part of that is on BJ Callahan's tactical switch, which I thought pulled them back in the attack after they had those couple of chances. Like, once Miami stopped giving them chances, Nashville didn't create them, right? The switch was defensively, Brian Acosta came on, he played as the 6, and it was much more of a 3-man midfield, and you had Tagseth to the one side instead of playing in that double pivot, and Tagseth being a little higher on the left took Alex Mule off the field. Now, I'm not about to come on and argue that Alex Mule was going to make the difference in this game. He wasn't. But Nashville, in a slightly different structure, with Surridge then pulled a little wider towards the left as sort of like the pseudo left winger in this front three with Mukhtar through the middle, it didn't look super well drilled, right? And
no.
I imagine the answer for that is because it really wasn't super well drilled, because Nashville didn't have a lot of time to drill that shape that we haven't seen from them basically all season long. I don't think this, as you said, Jeff, was the version that Nashville want to be. Miami, I do think once you erase the first 25, they were really good in this game. And it was a reminder of the fact that Miami, unlike any other team in the postseason, they truly control their destiny. Like, Miami's highs are higher than anybody else's in Major League Soccer. And when you have them playing like they played for the final 65 minutes of this game, they're a really hard team to beat. I thought Rodrigo de Paul showed up in this game in a way that he hasn't really since his very first couple of games for Miami. He was pulling strings deep in midfield. He looked up for it. Miami in general looked up for it. And I think that's refreshing if you are pulling for Miami in the Messi story or whatever it is, because they didn't in the first round last year, or at least they showed up, but Brad Guzan showed up harder. I don't know, however you want to think about that. But Miami did enough, Jeff, in this game to win. I thought they were the better team pretty clearly. And man, the highs that they showed remind me that this team, Messi now on a contract extension as well, 3-year deal through 2028. Like, this team doesn't seem to be stopping, even if they're going to lose a couple of like old wily vets at the end of this playoff run. I'm afraid of them if I'm other teams in MLS right now.
Well, and then let's make this our newsy bit on Messi's contract briefly, because I think that Nashville actually kind of did the thing that all the teams that struggle against Miami do, and that none of the teams that succeed against Miami do, which is to continue to game plan to Miami rather than yourselves, right? Like, I think that we've found the teams that are the clearest in their own approach and the teams that can execute that because it's them deciding what they want to do. Those teams tend to do really credibly. If they don't win, they're at least putting in performances they can be proud of. They're making it a frustrating game. Miami isn't really running away with those games 5-0. And you would maybe think that a team that is that naive to just say, let's do our own thing, maybe would be overrun. They don't have the physicality, this Inter Miami right now. They don't have the speed. They don't have the pace. They don't have the athleticism to be able to exploit expansive space. You usually have time to backtrack and catch up to Inter Miami on their breaks. Sadly, we've seen it happen whenever Messi and Suarez try to run like a 2v1. It's heartbreaking stuff, but this is why their game model doesn't try to create these situations and scenarios, really. And as you go into the next 3 years, just like if you're an opponent, just continue to play your game and make it difficult for Miami to play in response. Sam Surridge is not a winger. And I know that he wasn't like playing in like a traditional winger or playing as like a modern inverted winger. It was really kind of like a, like a wide target man of sorts, but like he found the ball 14 times in 90 minutes. And that, like, it's not all about how often your striker sees the ball. Obviously, like, these things can vary, but that's not getting one of your most important players based on both his record this year, being, a fringe best 11 contender and a fringe MVP contender, Golden Boot contender till the final weekend. That's not where you want him. And so when you're putting him off center, like, what does that say about your confidence of your own game model in this team? That's where I think it was so catastrophically wrong for Callahan. And that's where I think teams moving forward have to resist the temptation to get so scared coming up against Miami, because ultimately there are 10 other players and they will make either decisions or have successes that are going to have just as much to do with your result most of the time as what Messi does to your team.
I think that's more than fair. I think it's a really good look at Inter Miami and what they do to teams. Inter Miami, congratulations on your 3-1 win over Nashville. Jeff, we don't have a lot of time, so we're going to rapid fire these news segments from around MLS. We mentioned the Messi contract extension. It's a big deal. He will see Miami open up their new stadium in Miami. I think that's going to move the needle a little bit for that club in a really obvious way. That's the coldest take of all time. Let's stay in the Southeast and look at Atlanta United very briefly. Ronnie Deila fired a day after decision day. We haven't talked about that on this show just yet. The Athletic yesterday reporting that Tata Martino is the front runner to replace him. Jeff, we're getting the band back together. Let's get Gressel. Let's get Tito Villalba. Let's get Yamil Assad. Let's get Parkhurst. Let's get Laurent. Like, can we just
make him come out of retirement? Yeah.
I mean, let's force them with whatever means necessary. I think is like more than reasonable. Jeff, your thoughts on Deila's exit and Tata's maybe entrance?
Yeah, I think that it's another one where just Atlanta doesn't really seem to know what they want out of their coaches when they hire them, and there's always such a mismatch. It's a Manchester United issue where it's a mismatch between the squad that was built for 3 other coaches that's now playing for a different coach that wants them to do different things that they weren't brought in to do. And so, like, it's just like everything looked really sour. I don't know if I ever saw so much toxicity just in terms of the atmosphere as I was watching games that were played at Mercedes-Benz. Like, it was just so clear that the fan base was not impressed by not just like the results, obviously they weren't, but like even just the manner at which there was nothing that they could really take that sort of like a spiritual win from, or whatever, a virtual win. Like there was none of that to really be found. The over insistence on crossing, I think, was just really dated, and I think that in a weird way he had years to build up, or at least a couple to build up, from inheriting a roster from Patrick Vieira or from Dominic Tarrant and then turning it into an MLS Cup winner. And it's like he forgot that whole process and was like, let's just do what was working that year, and it just wasn't a fit. So better days ahead. Do I think Martino is the answer? He might be. I don't know. It was one of the more impressive jobs of the decade, what he was able to do to actually keep Miami on track in spite of all of their issues with personnel. But I don't know. It's just, it feels a little too, these things can either go really, really well or they can go really, really poorly. And it seems like you're just kind of out of ideas and you're like, fine, let's just bring back the guy after half a decade. So I don't know. I don't really have that much optimism that this is going to be the fix. I think that the fix is going to come much more from how the squad is turned over and fortified and the decisions that are made a bit higher above the coach. But Joe, what do you think? Is that discounting his impact on Atlanta a little bit?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think two things can be true here. One, that Tata is a very reasonable hire. I think he might, in fact, be the best candidate, like reasonable candidate available for them. He knows MLS. He knows Atlanta. Like he's experienced the highs before. And in a way that Miguel Almiron, who's physically declining, can't. Like he can communicate and get back to what that was before, right? Or at least has some influence to get there. So I think Martino's a perfectly fine hire. That's the first thing that's true. The second thing that's true is that Atlanta still have a lot of work to do, right? I'm looking at their roster profile from MLS. They have 6 players, only 6 on their entire senior roster with deals expiring at the end of 2025, or at least that they have team control to expire those deals at the end of 2025. They've got a lot of work to do. Like this roster just doesn't look very good. Atlanta missed on a lot of signings the last few transfer windows. They need to get a lot of things right with this roster if you want Tata Martino to get this team to compete in what is a very dangerous Eastern Conference. One thing to keep an eye out for, maybe a Alexi Marinchuk buyout. That would maybe open up a door for this team that they don't have right now. But I think you're exactly right, Jeff. There's a lot of work to be done above the coaching hire in Atlanta. But if it is, in fact, Martino, again, this is not a done deal. Jeff Carlisle also reported that Gio Savarese was a finalist, but it certainly sounds like Tata is the number one hire that are sort of going after right now. Let's stick on the coaching ranks very, very briefly. Marco Donadell's interim tag was removed in Montreal, so he's the manager now. That's enough said on that. Chris Armas out in Colorado. Jeff, this one sort of felt like it was building to this moment happening where Armas was out of contract. The reporting is that he and the front office in Colorado couldn't agree on the number of years to an extension, and so they don't all come back together.
They agreed on 0, yeah.
They agreed on 0. I know nothing about this, and I'm not intending to cast any doubt on reporting. Man, it sort of feels like if the two parties had wanted to make this work, they could have figured out a way to make this work. You know what I mean?
It really does.
It doesn't seem like it would have been that hard to figure out something. So at the end of the day, Chris Armas is out in Colorado. Jeff, I think there are some good pieces for Colorado. I also think, sort of similar to Atlanta, there's a lot of work to be done in the roster. At least their needs, I think, are a bit clearer, where they've needed a winger for what feels like a bajillion transfer windows in a row now. Maybe once they get out officially from the Kevin Cabral catastrophe, they can move forward there, and they also need help defensively. And I'm not a Zach Steffen believer, as folks on this show will know. I think they need help, but a new coach maybe brings some new energy, and maybe that's a good thing for Colorado.
Yeah, maybe, but I would say it's not quite Eric Ten Hag at Leverkusen, but I think that Chris Armas could feel hard done, that like he his team was seriously hamstrung by their decision to sell Georgi Mihailovic
Absolutely.
and then bring in a more developmental replacement than a ready-made. And you can see it in their results. Like once that move happens, I should say, once Mihailovic goes to Toronto, you can really see that's when they're dropping games. Like before their losses were coming against the LAFCs and the Philadelphias of MLS. And that's not just the Galaxy and Kansas City back-to-back in a week, both away, to be fair. But then Dallas as well and RSL. And these are the sorts of results that, again, this is why Dallas was able to get into the playoffs. They were winning those games that Colorado was losing. And that's where the points were changed. And that's how Colorado went from a team that we were talking about probably back in June, before the Mihailovic sale, as being like a fringe, like, they aren't the top 4 in the West or the top 5 in the West, but they certainly aren't the bottom 8. Right? Like we were giving them a lot of credence for that. It kind of fell apart there. There's a chance that maybe they need just that fresh voice. Like you said, sometimes a new coach can do a wonder of good, but I think that they still need to kind of figure out what that next iteration of this is. And you laid out the decisions that they need to make perfectly, the turnover that needs to be made as well. It's an interesting project, and I know that the Rapids, it feels like they're kind of forced to do these sorts of like spiritual sort of reinventions every 2 or 3 years, and much more frequently than most organizations. Well, that's just because that's what their ownership invests in them, right?
Yep.
Like they have enough to make these sort of short-term windows, and then they have to retool. And Porrick Smith and Fran Taylor have gotten very, very good at it. I think they're some of the best in Major League Soccer at doing this sort of work. But this is what's going to happen inevitably. You sell your best player, you replace with someone who's not ready to be the best player on a team just yet. That's going to take some time.
Yep. Yeah, I think there are lots of reasons to be critical of the front office in Colorado. I'm curious to see where they're going to go directionally with this next coach, and if they get the moves that need to be done in this offseason. We'll see what that ends up looking like. We've made enough fun of the Red Bulls maybe over the last few months, so I'll just say this news and then we'll get out of here. Sandro Schwartz fired as manager of the Red Bulls, came out earlier this week, and Jochen Schneider, who was the club's head of sport, has also been kindly shown the door. He's been replaced internally by Julian de Guzman, who was the club's sporting director underneath Schneider. So Schneider was the CSO. He was running the front office. De Guzman comes in. He's been involved with their next pro team, obviously involved in the first team as well. So now they were looking for a new coach. They should also be looking for some new players. So Red Bulls have a lot of work to do, again, given how darn good the Eastern Conference is. Jeff, let's tie a nice, pretty bow on this episode by me saying one simple thing to you. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this. Lots of back and forth, a ton of ground to cover, and you covered it tirelessly like the best version of Obed Vargas.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and thanks. It's fun. Like it's weird when we do these like 2-man because we're so used to the 3-man. But I had a lot of fun talking MLS plays with you. So thank you.
Can't do the third man runs, but I think we still won too just fine, Jeff. Listeners, we can't do this without you either. So thank you so much for listening. I completely forgot to plug the Patreon. It's in the show notes. Just go look at it. For now, we're gonna go. See ya on Wednesday. Goodbye.